All right, guys, I'm going to go over the Quiz 3 study guide with you, and we will start with number 1. I'm just going to zoom in on a little bit. All right, and let's get started. So we just want to solve each problem, and we want to use division using multiples. So we will start with setting up our problem. 160 divided by 8. So we always want to start with multiples of 10 because that's the easiest to do in our head. So 8 times 10 is 80, and then we just have to subtract. You can't take 8 out of 6, so I'm going to borrow, turn this into 16, and 16 minus 8 is 8. So now we have 80. So how many times can we fit 8 into 80? Well, we just did it up here. We said that 8 goes into 80 10 times. So I'm going to set it up with 10 again. 8 times 10 is 80. Subtract, we get 0. So we want to circle our numbers out on the side, and that makes our answer 20. All right, so let's look at number 2. 560 divided by 16. So we're going to set up our problem same way. And using multiples of 10, we can just start with 10 to make it easy. And do our backwards L. 16 times 10, in my head I know that that's 160 because I am just multiplying 16 times 1 and then adding a 0. So now I subtract 0, 6 minus 6 is 0, and 5 minus 1 is 4. All right, so now I have 400. I could just go for 10 again because I know 160 is less than 400, and I'm trying to look for a number that is close to 400 without going over, but I can tell that 160, even if I doubled it, would still be less than 400, so I'm gonna go ahead and jump up to using 20 because that's still a multiple of 10, and I can still do it in my head, but it's a little bit closer to 400. So 16 times 2 is 32, and then I have to add that 0, so I have 320. So that's much closer to 400, but it doesn't go over. So we'll take, now we're going to subtract. We're going to subtract and do 0. We can't take 2 away from 0, so we need to borrow. We have 10 minus 2 now is 80, and 3 minus 3 is 0, so I'm going to leave that blank. So now can 16 fit into 80? The answer is yes, of course it can. And now we have to come up with a number that's close, that we can multiply 16 by, that's close to 80 without going over. So I'm just going to go with 3 to be safe because I can tell that 16 times 3 probably isn't going to go over 80. So I'm going to put 3 on the outside here, do my backwards L. And 16 times 3, I could probably do it in my head if I really tried, but I can just do it right off to the side here just to be safe. I don't want to make a mistake and do all my division right and then make a silly multiplication mistake. So I'm going to do it off to the side. 6 times 3 is 18, so I carry my 1, and 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 48. So I'm going to put 48 in here, and then I'm going to subtract. Again, can't take 8 away from 0, so I'm going to borrow. 10 minus 8 is 2, and then 7 minus 4 is 3. So now I have 32, and I need to figure out how many times can I fit 16 into 32. So I know in my head that 16 times 2 gives me 32, so I know that the last number that I should use is 2. 16 times 2 is 32. Subtract, and I end up with 0. So now I am at the end of my problem, and I need to circle all my outside multiples and add them up. So I have 10 plus 20 is 30, 30 plus 3 is 33, and 33 plus 2 is 35. So my answer is 35. And I want to make sure to circle my answer nice and bold, so it's very clear that that is my answer. All right, so those are the first 2 done. Let's move down to number 3. Okay, so let's set up our problem. We have 425 divided by 23. So we're going to start the same way. I'm just going to start with 10 because that's an easy multiple to start with and I can do it in my head. So 23 times 10 is 230, and I'm just going to subtract. 5 minus 0 is 5. I can't do 2 minus 3, so I'm going to borrow. I'm going to turn that into a 12, and 12 minus 3 is 9. And then 3 minus 2 is 1. So now I have 195. I want to try and fit 23 into 195 as many times as I can without going over. And I know if I try 10, I'm going to end up with 230, and that's too big. So I want to go a little bit lower than 10. And I'm going to try 8. So 23 times 8. Again, I'm going to do this off to the side to make sure that I get the right answer. 8 times 3 is 24. Carry my 2. 8 times 2 is 16, plus 2 is 18, and now I have 184. Now I just have to check, is 184 less than 195? Yes, it is, so I can use that number. It was a perfect fit. All right, subtract. We have 5 minus 4 is 1, 9 minus 8 is 1, and 1 minus 1 is 0, so we're just going to leave that blank. Now we have 11 left over. Can I fit 23 into 11? No, I can't. So 11 becomes our remainder, and we circle our side numbers, add them together, and we get 18, remainder 11, and that is our answer. So we're going to circle it nice and bold, and then move on to number 4. Set up our problem so that we can solve it. 387 divided by 19. All right, so we're going to start with our 10, our multiple 10, because 19 times 10, in our head we can do 190. 7 minus 0 is 7. We can't do 8 minus 9, so I'm going to borrow. So now it's 18 minus 9, which I know is 9, and then 2 minus 1 is 1. Now I have 197. How many times can I fit 19 into 197 without going over 197? Well, I just did 19 times 10, and I know that that's 190, which is very close. So I'm just going to use 10 again. And we know that 19 times 10 is 190. So if we subtract, then we get 7. Can 19 fit into 7? No, it can't. So we know 7 is our remainder. And then I'm going to circle the side numbers. 10 plus 10 is 20, and then our remainder is 7. So our answer is 20, remainder 7. And that is the first page. All right, so let's look at the back now. We have this word problem that says, Miss Blackmore has 360 Skittles. She has 24 students and wants to give each student the same number of Skittles. How many Skittles will she give each student? Fill in the multiple tower for 24 to solve this problem. And that multiple tower is right next to the problem. So it starts all the way down here and goes all the way up to the top here. So what we need to do first is to fill in our multiple tower. And in order to do that, we just have to count up 24s. So it starts at 24. 24 plus 24 is 48. So that's the next number. 48 plus 24 is 72. 72 plus 24 is 96. 96 plus 24 is 120, and you just keep going up until you get to the very top. So I'm just going to fill in the numbers. We have 144. Then next is 168, which is already filled in for us. Then next we have 192. I'll move this down a little bit. Then we have 216. Then we have 240. We have 264. 288, 312, 336, 360, 384, 408, 432, getting to the top here, 456, And then the last one is 480. So before we even use this to solve our problem, what we want to do is do our benchmarks, right? So we want to mark where our multiples of 10 are. So knowing that this is a multiple tower of 24, it should be easy to see which of these is our multiple of 10, and that would be 240, because we know that 24 times 10 would be 240. So this is our 10th multiple. So I just like to mark it so that I can use it as a benchmark when I'm doing my problem. And then we can also mark our 20th benchmark as well, which is 240. Since it's the 10th multiple, if you just double it, you would get the 20th multiple, which is 480. So this is the 20th multiple. So now our tower is completely filled out, and that was part of our task in this problem. So we're done with that. And now we're going to use it to help us figure out this problem. So again, Miss Blackmore has 360 Skittles, and she has 24 students, and she wants to give each student the same number of Skittles. So how many will she give each student? So if we know that there's 24 students, we can use this multiple tower of 24 to figure out how many each student would get. So since there's 360 Skittles, we want to try and find that on our multiple tower, and it is right here. You can see 360 is right there. So looking at our benchmarks of 10th multiples here at 240 and 20th multiple here at 480, we just need to count up from 10 to get to this mark right here. So if this is the 10th multiple, this is the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th. So if 360 is the 15th multiple of 24, then we know that 360 divided by 24 equals 15. But we also know that this is a word problem, so this answer is not enough to answer the question. The question's asking us how many Skittles will she give each student, so the answer is actually 15 Skittles per student. And that is the answer to the word problem. All right, so let's look down at the last part, which is draw lines to match each expression with the correct answer. So the way that I would go about doing this is to actually go ahead and solve all of these problems so that when you get the answer, you'll know exactly where to match it to. So I have a notebook right underneath here, and that's where I'm going to do the work for these problems. So the first one that I want to do is 240 divided by 8. So I'm going to do that right here. And I'm going to set it up so it's ready to solve. I can already see that 8 is a multiple of 24, so this is probably going to fit in perfectly, and it probably won't be a very hard problem to do. But I am going to start with my multiples of 10. And instead of 10, because I know that's going to be kind of low, 8 times 10 is going to be 80, and that's going to be kind of low. I want to speed up the process of solving this problem. So I'm actually going to go with 2 instead, or 20, sorry, instead of 10. So I'll do 8 times 20. And I know that 8 times 2 is 16. And then I just have to add a 0. So I end up with 160. Definitely a lot closer to 240 than 80 would have been. So it was a good place to start. So I subtract, I get 0. I can't subtract 6 from 4, so I'm going to borrow and get 14. 14 minus 6 is 8, and now I have 80 left. So can 8 fit into 80? Yes, it can, and I actually know that 8 can fit into 80 exactly 10 times, because 10 times 8 is 80. I'm going to subtract, and I get 0. So I circle my outside numbers, and I know that my answer is 30. So I'm going to look back at my problem, and I know that 240 divided by 8 is 30. So I'm going to draw a line between those two. All right, so let's look at the next one, 660 divided by 33. All right, so 33 on the outside, that's our divisor, and our dividend is 660. All right, so now We can start with multiple of 10. I'm going to start down at 10 just to be safe. 33 times 10 I know is going to be 33 with a 0 on the end. Subtract them. I get 0. 6 minus 3 is 3. 6 minus 3 is 3. So I have 330. I just did 33 times 10 and got 330. So I know if I do 10 again, I will get the same answer. So I'm going to do 10 down here again. 33 times 10 is 330. I'm going to subtract and I end up with 0. So I'm going to circle my outside numbers. 10 plus 10 is 20. So 660 divided by 33 is 20. So I'm going to draw my line there. All right, next one. 360 divided by 15. And I'm going to start with 10 again, just because it's an easy place to start. And if you're not sure, just start with 10. Even if the problem takes you a long time to do because you're going with small numbers, you'll still end up with the correct answer in the end if you do all your subtraction right. All right, so 15 times 10 is 150 because it's 15 and add a 0. So I subtract 0. 6 minus 5 is 1, and 3 minus 1 is 2, so I have 210. Now I have to think about how many times would I be able to fit 15 into 210. I could just go with 10 again and make it easy. That way I don't have to worry about making any mistakes. I know that I'll be able to multiply 15 times 10 in my head easily and correctly. So I'm just going to go with that. 210 minus 150, 0. I can't subtract 5 from 1, so I'm going to borrow. 11 minus 5 is 6, so I have 60. Now, I know that 15 doubled is 30. So if 15 doubled is 30, 15 4 times would be 60. So I'm going to try 4 down here. And 15 times 4, I can do it right off to the side here, just to be sure that I'm correct. 5 times 4 is 20, so I'm going to bring down the 0 and bring up the 2. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 2 is 6, so it is 60. I was right. So if I subtract, I get 0, and I'm just going to circle my outside numbers. 10 plus 10 plus 4 is 24. So then 360 divided by 15 is 24. So I'm going to draw a line here. Now I could just say, well, this is the only one left, so I'm going to draw a line, but I am going to make sure that it is the correct answer. I don't want to take any chances. I'm just going to try it in my notebook, just for practice too. So 406 divided by 14. Again, I'm just going to start with 10 to make it easy for myself. And 14 times 10 I know is 140. So I'm going to subtract. 6 minus 0 is 6. I can't take 4 away from 0, so I'm going to borrow. 10 minus 4 is 6. And then 3 minus 1 is 2. Now I have 266. So I'm just going to do 10 again because I know 14 times 10 gave me 140, and that's less than 266, so it's a safe bet. I'm going to go with 10 again. 14 times 10 is 140. And again, I'm just going to subtract. So 6 minus 0 is 6. 6 minus 4 is 2. And 2 minus 1 is 1. Now I have 126. I need to figure out what number I can multiply 14 by to get 126 without going over. I know if I try 10 again, it's going to be 140, which is too high. So I'm going to try 8 just to be safe. I could try 9, but it may still be a little bit too high, so I'm just going to do 8, and I can always do another layer if it's too low. So 14 times 8, I'm going to do that off to the side here. Make sure my multiplication is correct. 8 times 4 is 32, so I'm going to bring down the 2 and carry the 3. 8 times 1 is 8, and 8 plus 3 is 11. So I have 112. So I'm going to put 112 on the inside here. Subtract. 6 minus 2 is 4. 2 minus 1 is 1, and now I have 14. Can 14 fit into 14? Yes, it can, and it can fit in one time. So I'm going to put a 1 on the outside, and then 14 times 1 is 14. So I'm going to subtract, and I end up with 0. So I don't have a remainder, and I can count up my outside numbers. 10 plus 10 is 20, plus 8 is 28, plus 1 is 29. So my answer is 29, and now I can check to make sure that the last answer is correct, and it is. So I've connected all my answers, and I know that they're all right because they all match up. So that is the Quiz 3 study guide. I hope this review helped you to get all the correct answers, and good luck.